Elsbeth, she at this point in the story is really fading as a character. She I'm just not in the beginning of the series I was actually more impressed with her and curious about her. She's like, oh, I'm a survivor, and so it's like, okay, this sounds good, I want to know about that. But it's been like so many episodes since we even got a peep out of her.
That's a good point. Yeah, she's very background in episode 4. Is she even in episode 5? No, she's not.
Is she? Oh,
no, because they go off into hyperspace, and we don't go back to them at all in episode 5.
Yeah, you're right.
So you're right. She's. I think one of the flaws is, so they bring up witchcraft and witches in episode 4, which is established in Star Wars canon, and I'll talk about it later. But Clone Wars does a great job of. They're called the Witches of Dathomir, the Night Sisters.
Yeah,
and
there's some guys.
They're awesome characters.
Yeah.
And I think that when you can't just walk into Star Wars and say witches, what are we talking about?
Which is what it sounded like to me, because I didn't know the Witches of Dathomir.
There you go.
To me, in this show, we walked into Star Wars and said witches.
Boom. There you go. What? Witches?
Yeah.
What do we got? Goblins coming next and ghouls. So now Clone Wars took witches and introduced them correctly. They slowly introduced them. They didn't just say witches. They showed that these are Force users. They have a different take on the Force. It's a society of all women, which is very interesting. They have a hierarchy with a mother at the top. Yeah. And they use bows and arrows, like the Archer Huntress motif in a lot of hero and warrior stories. And they're in Asajj Ventress, another great character from the Clone Wars. She started as a witch of Dathomir and becomes a Sith Lord, or tries to. So they earned it in the Clone Wars. They built it up. They built stories around it to help you understand it. And this show skips all that and says witches. And so we don't know what that means. We don't know who she is, what culture she's attached to. We know nothing about her. So I think that's part of the reason why this character is kind of getting stale, because what else is she doing in this show?
Yeah. And why on earth is she so desperate to help Thrawn, her lord or whatever? Like, what kind of deal?
Yeah, there's no tie there.
Yeah, it's very frustrating, because I want to like that character. She's very interesting, but we're not getting any doors into who she is.
Well, and she was in a Mandalorian episode as this character.
Yeah,
and she fought. Did she fight Ahsoka?
She did. She fought her with a Beskar lance, if you will.
And that was the episode that Michael Biehn Hicks.
Oh yes.
Yeah. He was in that episode. It was like instant pleasure seeing Michael Biehn again. And that episode always stuck out in my head. But yeah, Elsbeth was introduced in The Mandalorian in an Ahsoka episode. So you're right. Now that I think about it, they should be able to get some more mileage off her.
I think so. She's very unused and misused by not even using her or giving us any kind of backstory as to why is she doing what she's doing.
Well, and the Night Sisters used their powers, and they seemed like they were good at it in a way that Jedi and Sith were unaccustomed to dealing with. So they always seem to have a little bit of like an angle on the Jedi and Sith in the Clone Wars. And I don't get any of that in this from her.
Yeah. And also there's rumors out there that perhaps Morak was actually one of her creations, because when he dies, there's like a green smoke that comes out of him.
Yes.
And so if so, like one line would have really helped. Like, oh, here's my servant. Take him on your travels.
Totally.
Like how long did that take? That wasn't a minute. That was like a half a second for me to say that. And it's like, why are we getting an incomplete story?
Totally.
It's not complete.
Well, and the Witches of Dathomir in Clone Wars, they would build these like Savage Opress, and they would tell him, almost like a Manchurian candidate, they would give him a command, they would give him an agenda, and then they would hide it and send him off. And that was compelling to me. So if you're right, if Elsbeth was like, go out into the woods and find them, right there we understand that there's a master servant warrior relationship here, and she's calling the shots, and this guy follows her bidding. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
And it would give us a clue.
Well, for about two weeks, the entire internet was trying to find out who Mark was. So it's just some guy. Yeah, he's just some guy.
That's like Snoke, where everyone's trying to figure out Snoke, and they're like, he's dead. It's like,
Don't worry about it.
You don't do that. Don't do that. Like, from a writing standpoint, what are you thinking?